Hello, how you guys doing? I hope you have a good holiday going into the new year. And this is probably gonna be one of my final videos of this year, and we'll see how next year turns around. But I wanted to record this video and This is gonna be January 1st because I think I'm gonna upload it tomorrow. And I'm going to show you the countries, how different countries view black people. And you're going to be surprised. When I mean black people, African Americans, Caribbeans, Africans, anybody that look like a black person. And you're going to be shocked on what countries, how they really treat their people. So let's get with the video. Let's start with the Ukraine, and then we're gonna go from there. Well, let's start with Russia.
In the vast expanse of Russia, where snowflakes often outnumber people, being black is like being the lone pop of color in a sea of white. Picture this: Russia, with its whopping 144 million folks, and only a humble 70,000 of them rocking the melanin-rich shades. It's like having a Samsung phone in the USA. You stand out, and suddenly you're the only one in the room. But here's the twist. The history of black folks in Russia isn't your typical tale of slavery and colonization. Unlike the USA, France, Portugal, Spain, and Germany, Russia didn't get its dose of diversity through the shackles of forced migration or slavery. Now here's where the plot thickens. The journey to Russia was an invitation, but the welcome party wasn't exactly a red carpet affair. Fast forward to today, being black in Russia is like holding a double-edged sword. You wonder, will my skin color be a ticket to different treatment, or will I just be embraced as the human being I am? In this video, we're about to lift the curtain on the untold reality of what it's like to be black in Russia. Forget the stereotypes, and let's dive into the lived experiences, the challenges, and the moments that make you ask, what's the real story here? Join us as we unravel the unknown facets of a life colored by both the uniqueness of being black and the complexities of navigating through a predominantly white landscape. Also, as a way of supporting the channel, hit the like button of the video, share, and subscribe to help the channel grow. Your support means a lot to us. Before we go into the reality of being black in Russia, let's take some time to understand the relationship between Russia and black people, and how the black people in Russia today even got there. Unlike the United States and European counterparts, where the shadows of the African slave trade loom large, Russia's connection with people of African descent is a tale spun during the Soviet era. Picture this: the 18th and 19th centuries, a time when Russia stood apart, refraining from partaking in the ominous trade and colonization of Africa that gripped Europe and America. In a surprising twist, Tsar Nicholas I took a moral stand, outlawing the trade of African slaves in Russia. Russia, despite its acceptance of serfdom, deemed the enslavement of Africans immoral. Fast forward to 1895, and here's another unexpected turn. When the Italian army invaded Ethiopia, Russia, recoiling at the attack on a Christian population, took action. In a gesture that defied expectations, Russia supplied weapons to Ethiopian troops, aiding them in defeating the Italian invaders. This historic moment not only showcases Russia's opposition to slavery, but also its willingness to stand up against injustice on the global stage. But how did people of African descent find their way to Russia? Unlike the grim narratives of forced migration, the story unfolds in a Soviet script. Picture Russians in the 19th century, donning a white gaze, viewing individuals from Africa not as sources of free labor, but as exotic beings from distant lands. This perspective birthed a series of ethnographic exhibitions in the mid-19th century. These exhibitions, held in zoos, theaters, and circuses across the country, purported to share knowledge of African cultures. However, the truth lay in the spectacle, the showcasing of difference. Fast forward to the era of communism in the Soviet Union, and a new chapter begins in the story of black individuals in Russia. Communism, with its lofty ideals of egalitarianism rooted in Marxist values, technically prohibited racism and discrimination. The Russian Criminal Code echoed these sentiments, outlawing and persecuting racial and ethnic discrimination. While this legal framework sought to create a society free from the shackles of prejudice, the reality was not a complete departure from biases. Even as the Soviet Union aimed for a classless, racially egalitarian society, pockets of casual racism persisted, particularly towards ethnic minorities like Jews. Pejorative remarks lurked in the shadows, revealing the nuanced struggle between ideology and ingrained biases. Nevertheless, when juxtaposed with the stark racial segregation and oppression faced by Black Americans during the same period, the Soviet promise of equality became a beacon of hope. In the 1930s, as racial tensions simmered in the United States, thousands of African Americans sought refuge in the Soviet Union, drawn by the allure of a more peaceful life. The Soviet Union, with its proclaimed commitment to eradicating racial inequality, became an attractive haven for those weary of the systemic discrimination they faced back home. The classless society envisioned by Marxist principles beckoned to those who yearned for a world where the color of one's skin did not determine their worth. Enter the Harlem Renaissance, a cultural and artistic movement that resonated far beyond the borders of the United States. Leaders of this movement, including Claude McKay and Langston Hughes, embarked on journeys to Russia. There, they discovered an unexpected reception, one that embraced them as artists and individuals, providing opportunities that eluded them in their homeland. In the heart of the Soviet experiment, these creative minds found acceptance and validation, an experience starkly different from the racial strife gripping the United States. While Russia offered a safe haven compared to the US and Europe, it wasn't pure bliss. During the early Stalinist era in the Soviet Union, there were relatively fewer Africans present, but those who were there noticed a stark contrast between the Soviet rhetoric against imperialist oppression and the actual depiction of Africans in Soviet public media and discourse. Woodford McClellan's study of black students at the Communist University of the Toilers of the East, KUTV, during the 1920s and 30s, reveals instances where black African students took issue with the portrayal of blacks in Soviet media. For instance, some African students objected to the use of blackface in plays, and others were offended by racial epithets such as monkey. There was a prevalent and troubling association of black Africans with apes and monkeys in theaters, reinforcing racial stereotypes. McClellan's research on early Soviet children's books up to the late 1930s further indicates that, even in a period marked by experimental artistic production, black people, particularly Africans, were often depicted as wild, animalistic figures far removed from modernity. As the world grappled with the aftermath of World War II, the USSR opened its doors once again, this time welcoming a second wave of black immigrants, this time from African nations. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union sought to expand its influence globally, including in Africa. As part of its strategy to support decolonization movements and gain allies on the continent, the Soviet Union offered various forms of assistance to African nations, including educational support. One significant aspect of Soviet assistance was the provision of scholarships for students from African countries to study in the Soviet Union. These scholarships covered a range of academic disciplines, including science, technology, medicine, and social sciences. The goal was to educate a new generation of leaders and professionals who might be sympathetic to Soviet ideologies and policies. African students who received these scholarships often studied at Soviet universities and institutions, where they were exposed to Soviet educational methods and ideological perspectives. Many of these students later returned to their home countries and played important roles in politics, academia, and other fields. However, it's essential to note that the Soviet Union's motives were not purely altruistic. They aimed to cultivate political and ideological allies in the global arena. This educational outreach was part of a broader strategy that included economic aid, military assistance, and diplomatic support for African nations struggling against colonialism or dealing with the challenges of post-colonial statehood. Compared to the United States and Europe, the Soviet Union offered hope to the African continent. The treatment of black people in the United States was marked by racial segregation, institutionalized racism, and discriminatory laws known as Jim Crow laws. These laws enforced racial segregation in public facilities, schools, transportation, and various other aspects of daily life. African Americans faced systemic discrimination and were denied equal rights and opportunities in many parts of the country. In contrast, the Soviet Union presented itself as a champion of anti-colonial movements and a supporter of racial equality. The Soviet government condemned the racial discrimination faced by black people in the United States and other Western countries, using this as a part of their ideological propaganda against capitalism and imperialism. The Soviet Union sought to portray itself as an ally of the oppressed, including those struggling against racial injustice. The Soviet message resonated with some African leaders and activists who were engaged in anti-colonial struggles or seeking support for civil rights. The Soviet Union's rhetoric and actions in support of decolonization and racial equality in Africa were intended to gain influence and create alliances with newly independent nations. However, once in the Soviet Union, these students experienced everyday racism directed at them from all classes of society. During these times, black people were usually depicted as wild, animalistic figures in children's books and media. The impact of these depictions became more visible following the 1957 International Youth Festival in the Soviet Union. Tensions arose between Soviet citizens and Africans, particularly African students studying in the USSR. These students received special benefits and opportunities, including government stipends, greater freedom of movement, and access to foreign stores off limits to most Soviets. Additionally, their curricula differed from that of Soviet students, focusing on transferable skills for implementation in their home countries. However, Soviet officials emphasized that African students were expected to return home after completing their studies, and were not allowed to remain in the USSR for extended periods. The disparities in treatment were highlighted by the African-American writer and feminist Audre Lorde in her 1976 essay about her trip to the Soviet Union. Lorde noted stark differences in accommodations, with some African and Asian participants in a conference housed in shabby hostels, while she stayed in a first-rate hotel. These observations underscored the contradictions between the Soviet Union's purported anti-imperialist stance and the discriminatory treatment experienced by Africans within its borders. In the period from the 1960s to the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, African students in the USSR faced significant challenges, including racial prejudice and discrimination. These students often carried knives as a form of self-protection and recounted experiences of being subjected to racial slurs by their Soviet classmates. The case of Edmund Asare Ado and the subsequent protests by African students in Moscow in 1963 highlighted the challenges and contradictions faced by African students studying in the Soviet Union during that period. The incident brought attention to issues of racism and discrimination within Soviet society, challenging the narrative propagated by the Soviet government about its commitment to racial equality. Edmund Asare Ado, a Ghanaian medical student, was found dead under disputed circumstances. African students alleged that he had been murdered, pointing to the unlikelihood of him venturing into a remote area where his body was found. They claimed that the motive behind the alleged murder was his relationship with a Russian woman, which they believed had provoked a violent response. The official Soviet explanation, however, attributed Asare Ado's death to freezing in the snow while intoxicated. The autopsy, conducted by Soviet medics with observers from Ghana, concluded that the cause of death was an effect of cold in a state of alcohol-induced stupor. The conflicting narratives fueled suspicion and frustration among the African student community.
New Year's is all about fresh starts, but let's face it, our food supplies are shaky and the future is
The prices blow my mind. I feel so rich. I feel like a billionaire.
It's commercial.
Ever notice how the spotlight of accusations about racism always seems to be pointed at Europe and the US? They're the ones often in the hot seat, navigating reforms and discussions to tackle the issue head-on. But guess what? There's a sneaky player in this game of shadows, the Arab world. From the bustling streets of Egypt to the vibrant markets of Morocco and the oil-rich lands of Kuwait, being black in the Arab world can be a tough ride. Picture this. Slurs, sneers, and degradation could follow you to the market, dance with you at your job, or even settle in next to you at the cinema. But why aren't many people talking about it? And why is the Arab world so adept at keeping this dark chapter of human history under wraps? In this video, we're about to unravel the layers of racism woven into the fabric of the Arab world. We're shining a light on why Afro-Arabs find themselves relegated to the status of second-class citizens. But that's not all. We're also diving into the closets of history that Arabs have been desperately trying to keep locked away from the prying eyes of the world. So, grab your metaphorical flashlight, because we're about to embark on a journey through the hushed corridors of racism in the Arab world. Join us as we expose the untold stories, challenge the silence, and unravel the complex web of discrimination that Afro-Arabs face daily. It's time to confront the uncomfortable truths and uncover why the Arab world wants to sweep this chapter under the rug. Also, as a way of supporting the channel, hit the like button of the video, share, and subscribe to help the channel grow. Your support means a lot to us. Before we dive into the unsettling reality of anti-black racism in present-day Arab societies, we need to navigate the murky waters of a taboo subject, the historical connection between Arabs and black people. While one might assume it to be rooted in trade or cultural exchanges, the truth is far more traumatic. Brace yourselves for a journey through the chapters of the Arab slave trade, a dark period when Arabs traversed the unforgiving Sahara Desert, capturing black individuals to fuel the growth of their nations. The early days of the Arab slave trade, a time when the concept of human beings as commodities began to take shape. It was not just about trading goods, it was about trading lives. The Arabs, seeking to bolster their economies and expand their influence, turned their attention to the vast lands south of the Sahara. As caravans carved their way through the desert, a sinister enterprise unfolded, the capturing and enslavement of black Africans. In the heart of the Sahara, Arab slave traders ventured into communities, tearing families apart and shackling individuals who would soon become part of a dehumanizing trade network. This wasn't merely a transaction of labor, it was the brutal uprooting of lives, a disruption that would echo through generations. The early days of the Arab slave trade marked the beginning of a dark legacy that continues to cast its shadow over the present. Egypt, Morocco, Kuwait, and many other Arab countries participated as key players in a chilling trade that echoes through time. In the early days, these countries weren't just bystanders, they were right in the thick of it. Egypt, with the Nile as its ancient lifeline, became a pivotal point for enslaved individuals, marching through the Sahara towards an uncertain fate. The echoes of that time still linger along the riverbanks, a silent witness to a trade that treated people as commodities. Jumping westward, you will find that behind the scenes of Morocco. Marrakesh, with its lively souks and grand palaces, hides a history stained by the trade in black lives. Picture the market squares, once alive with vibrant colours, now holding the weight of a past that sought economic prosperity at the expense of human suffering. Slavery in Arab countries was abolished completely by 1970, with the exception of Mauritania, which did so in 1981. The end of the Arab slave trade did not signal an end to the complexities it birthed. Instead, it left an indelible mark on the collective consciousness of these nations. The scars of this history linger, shaping the dynamics of race and identity in contemporary Arab societies. The present-day manifestation of anti-black racism finds its roots in the legacy of this traumatic connection, echoing through the streets of Cairo, Marrakesh, and Kuwait City. Racism in Arab media. In the media all over Arab countries, racism is openly displayed even in the holy month. In the sacred month of Ramadan, a time when Muslims worldwide observe fasting and spiritual reflection, an unfortunate and recurring trend has marred the airwaves across the Arab world. Despite the intended promotion of family-friendly content during this period, instances of racist mockery and derogatory language against Afro-Black Arabs and Black African migrants persistently infiltrate the television screens of millions of Arab households. The year 2018 was the most outrageous, with two prominent Ramadan TV series, Azmi We Ashkan and Block Gush Mara, standing out for their offensive content. The Egyptian comedy series Azmi We Ashkan created by the controversial producer Ahmed El-Sobki, drew widespread condemnation for repeatedly featuring its lead actors donning blackface. Additionally, the series employed racist language, including the use of the N-word, and portrayed black individuals as servants who spoke broken Arabic and practiced sorcery. The implications of such content extended beyond mere entertainment, perpetuating harmful stereotypes and reinforcing discriminatory attitudes towards Afro-Black Arabs. Similarly, the Kuwaiti comedy series Block Gashmara dedicated an entire episode to actors in blackface portraying Sudanese people as lazy and cynical. This episode fueled outrage on social media, with viewers expressing their discontent over the perpetuation of harmful stereotypes. Despite the public outcry, the film crews behind both series staunchly defended their work. Ahmed Mohi, the scriptwriter of Azmi Wi Ashkan, downplayed the racial slurs, claiming that the show did not aim to insult any part of the Egyptian people. Meanwhile, Kuwaiti actor Hassan al-Balam, involved in the controversial episode of Block Gashmara, apologized on Instagram, but asserted that the criticism against him was exaggerated. These instances of racial insensitivity and offensive content were not isolated incidents, but reflective of a pervasive issue deeply rooted in Arab popular culture and cinema. The use of blackface, racist language, and degrading portrayals of Afro-Black Arabs and Black African migrants has been a long-standing problem in the region's media. Examining the historical context reveals a troubling pattern of anti-black racism in Arab cinema spanning decades. Examples abound, such as the 2001 Egyptian film Africano, where a lead character remarks, "Is there a power cut in there or what?" upon seeing a group of black people leaving a nightclub. Similarly, the 2005 Egyptian film Ayal Habiba, Lover Kids, features characters making derogatory remarks about a Sudanese man, played by an Arab in blackface, perpetuating harmful stereotypes and reinforcing discriminatory attitudes towards Afro-Black Arabs. Black individuals in Arab cinema are consistently cast into subordinate roles, reduced to servitude, housemaids, prostitutes, clowns, and doorkeepers working for affluent families. The derogatory depictions extend to their physical appearance, with black men and women portrayed as dirty and sluggish, subject to racist mockery, and associated with bad luck. Such representations contributed to the dehumanization of Afro-Black Arabs and Black African migrants, perpetuating harmful stereotypes that have real-world consequences. Even black children have not been spared from racial mockery in Arab cinema. The 2003 Egyptian comedy Eli Bali Balak, My Thoughts Are Your Thoughts, features a protagonist addressing his wife after mistaking a black maid's child for his own, saying, "You are white and I am white. How could we have this bar of dates as a child?" This scene reflects the deep-seated biases present in Arab cinema, where skin color is used as a basis for ridiculing and demeaning individuals. The issue is further exacerbated by the practice of Arab washing, mirroring Hollywood's notorious whitewashing, where non-black Arabs are cast in black roles. This often involves actors donning blackface, exaggerated fake features, and engaging in racial caricatures that reinforce negative stereotypes. The pervasive use of blackface in Arab cinema contrasts sharply with the trend in the United States, where the practice has largely been phased out. Remarkably, for decades, the first and only dark-skinned actor to play leading roles in Egyptian cinema was Ahmed Zaki. Even he did not escape racial characterization, being nicknamed the Bronze Star and the Black Tiger. Back in 2008, when Adel Al-Kalbani, a black Saudi imam, was appointed to lead prayers at the Grand Mosque in Mecca, you'd think it would be celebrated as a step towards inclusivity. But no, instead he faced a storm of racial insults, with some Muslims openly protesting his appointment. Imagine that, a spiritual leader facing backlash just because of the color of his skin. It's a stark reminder that racism is alive and well, even in the holiest of places. Now, the ripple effects of this kind of discrimination go beyond hurtful comments. They seep into the fabric of society, affecting young black individuals who struggle to find positive role models. Flip through the channels or scroll through mainstream media, and you'll notice a stark lack of representation for Afro-Black Arabs. This absence leaves a void, making it challenging for young people to see themselves reflected in the media landscape. The consequences are not just about feeling left out, they're about grappling with a social stigma that pushes some to disassociate themselves from their black identity. It's disheartening to see individuals deny their African heritage, engaging in intra-racial racism, striving to assimilate, and shockingly, even resorting to skin bleaching in an attempt to fit into societal norms. It's like a silent struggle happening right before our eyes, one that many might choose to overlook, but the impact goes beyond identity crises. This racism extends its claws into the lives of migrants and migrant workers, subjecting them to unthinkable hardships. Take the harrowing stories of Ethiopian women in Lebanon, subjected to abuse and exploitation, or the shocking practices of torture and slavery faced by African migrants in Libya. These are not isolated incidents. They are manifestations of a centuries-old undercurrent of entrenched racism in Arab countries. Racism in Morocco. Morocco is a country that still holds on to its slavery past and continues to deny that racism exists in the country. However, in daily life, racist terms and derogatory labels are used to refer to black Moroccans, diminishing their worth and humanity. This language, rooted in historical prejudices, reflects a lack of understanding and empathy. The animalization of black people in Morocco is not infrequent. Black individuals are sometimes compared to animals like monkeys and pigs, reducing them to dehumanizing stereotypes. This treatment is especially targeted at migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, making them feel like outsiders. They can be called Kurd, Khanzir, Akil Lahmi al-Bashar, and Haywan. These words refer to them as monkey, pig, cannibal, and animal. They may be greeted by the sounds monkeys supposedly make, which is described as gwera, gwera. The heritage of black Moroccans is frequently denied and accosted with the veiled attack of the phrase menenti, where are you from, said by their fellow citizens as if true Moroccans are all white. Black Moroccans often face questions about their origins that imply they don't belong in the country. This exclusionary attitude denies their heritage and makes it harder for them to feel like valued members of society. Surprisingly, the history of slavery, the diversity of the population, and racism are not taught in schools or discussed openly. This silence perpetuates ignorance and prevents progress in addressing discrimination. Racism in Egypt. In 2018, Mohammed Azmi, the director of the Egyptian Monitoring Center on Racism, unveiled a disturbing reality about the state of racial representation in Egyptian media. The results of an extensive investigation, conducted in collaboration with co-authors, shed light on a deeply entrenched issue that permeated various forms of media, from news reports to talk shows and movies. The findings were disheartening, revealing a pervasive trend of disparagement and mockery directed at individuals with dark skin or those who spoke in the Upper Egyptian dialect. The study, which spanned the decade from 2007 to 2017, revealed a disconcerting pattern in Egyptian cinema. Nearly half of the films produced during this period were found to perpetuate stereotypes and negative portrayals of people with dark skin or those hailing from Upper Egypt. Individuals from this region were consistently relegated to stereotypical roles, often depicted as janitors or servants. This not only reinforced harmful stereotypes, but also contributed to the marginalization of a significant portion of the Egyptian population. A particularly distressing aspect of the investigation focused on the use of racist language and hate speech in media content. Approximately 1/3 of the talk shows and news reports produced between 2011 and 2016, specifically addressing topics related to Upper Egypt, were found to contain elements of racism. The prevalence of such language further exacerbated the discriminatory narrative, perpetuating harmful stereotypes and fostering a hostile environment for those targeted. Perhaps one of the most alarming revelations from the study was the stark underrepresentation of individuals with dark skin in media jobs. The report highlighted the virtual absence of diverse voices within the industry, pointing to a systemic issue that extended beyond on-screen portrayals. The dearth of opportunities for people with dark skin not only limited their visibility but also hindered their ability to influence the narrative and challenge prevailing stereotypes. Racism in Tunisia. In 2018, the Tunisian parliament took a historic step by approving a law aimed at combating racial discrimination, making Tunisia the second African country, after South Africa, and the first Arab nation to adopt such legislation. Known as Law No. 11/2018, Its primary objective is to eradicate all forms of racial discrimination and their manifestations. The law underscores the importance of preserving human dignity and achieving equality among individuals in their enjoyment of rights and fulfillment of duties. By penalizing incitement to violence, hatred, discrimination, and racism, as well as the dissemination of ideas based on racial discrimination, the legislation seeks to foster a more inclusive and tolerant society. The reason for this groundbreaking law traces back to 2016 and the case of Sabrina, a black Tunisian who experienced verbal abuse on Habib Bourguiba Avenue in downtown Tunis. Shockingly, when Sabrina attempted to report the crime to the police, she was turned away due to the absence of a specific law against racism. This incident underscored a glaring gap in Tunisia's legal framework, prompting a broader societal dialogue on the need for comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation. The urgency for legal measures against racism became even more apparent on December 25, 2016, when 3 Congolese students were brutally stabbed at a train station in Tunis. This shocking act of violence prompted civil society organizations to rally for change. Prime Minister Youssef Chahed expressed his support for anti-discrimination legislation the following day, signaling a commitment to address the deep-seated issue of racism within the country. However, it's crucial to recognize that these incidents are not isolated. The documentary Tunisia's Dirty Secret by Al Jazeera sheds light on the pervasive racism that many Tunisians face in their daily lives. The film captures the experiences of individuals like Hamza, who, equipped with a hidden camera in his glasses, faced derogatory remarks from passers-by. The blatant racism manifested in slurs and insults, reflecting the harsh reality that black Tunisians and migrants contend with regularly. Notably, the documentary unveils troubling practices, such as some towns in the south of Tunisia, like Sidi Makhlouf in Medellin, implementing separate school buses for black children. This segregation in education underscores the deeply rooted nature of racial discrimination, permeating even the most fundamental aspects of daily life. Such practices not only perpetuate inequality, but also contribute to the marginalization of black Tunisians from an early age. The underrepresentation of black Tunisians in the public sphere further highlights the systemic nature of racism in the country. As of 2018, there was only one black member of parliament, Jamila Debek Siksi from Enada, signaling a lack of diversity within the political landscape. Moreover, the first black newsreader on state-run TV did not appear until 2018. These instances of underrepresentation underscore the challenges faced by black Tunisians in accessing opportunities and positions of influence within the broader societal framework. In Tunisia, the absence of official recognition of race has contributed to a lack of statistical data on the black population, making it challenging to understand the extent of racial discrimination and socio-economic disparities. However, recent survey data from the Afrobarometer conducted in April-May 2018 sheds light on the situation. Out of 1,199 respondents, approximately 8% were classified as black. These findings reveal that black Tunisians face significant socio-economic challenges compared to their counterparts. They are disproportionately located in rural areas, with a 10 percentage point difference compared to other Tunisians. Additionally, they are 15 percentage points less likely to own essential items such as radios, cars, or computers. Education also emerges as a significant factor, with black Tunisians being approximately 10% less likely to have completed primary school. The most alarming statistic is the unemployment rate, where black Tunisians are almost twice as likely to be unemployed, at 42%, than other Tunisians, at 25%. This economic disparity contributes to widespread poverty among black Tunisians, limiting their access to higher education and exacerbating their exclusion from various sectors of public life. Beyond economic challenges, black Tunisians also face severe underrepresentation in politics, media, and other spheres. The consequences of this underrepresentation extend beyond mere exclusion. Many black Tunisians become targets of verbal abuse and violence due to their visibility. In southern Tunisia, the situation is particularly dire, as the black community often resides in isolated areas, such as Gosba village, compounding their marginalization. Adding to the complexity of the issue is the conflation of black Tunisians with sub-Saharan African migrants. This conflation, fueled by the invisibility of black Tunisians in public life, leads to a common assumption in Tunisian society that all black individuals in the country are of sub-Saharan origin. This misconception further hampers the recognition of black Tunisians and exacerbates their challenges. Sub-Saharan migrants themselves face distinct challenges, including racial discrimination, language barriers, documentation issues, and limited access to education and healthcare. Many of these migrants are fleeing humanitarian crises and conflicts, transiting through North Africa with the hope of continuing to Europe. However, whether they intend to transit or stay in Tunisia for study and economic reasons, they often find themselves residing in the country for extended periods. The visibility of these migrants is compounded by the overarching assumption that they...
Sorry about that. As I'm go on and on and on. But I want to show you another country. Put these countries in real quick.
Download TikTok and shop now.
In recent years, the media has portrayed Ukraine as being under siege by its main backer, Russia. Ukraine is frequently presented as a victim seeking international assistance and protection against its perceived adversaries. Despite calls for unity, Ukrainians abuse black people. The media's focus on Ukraine's conflict with Russia has made it easier to disregard internal concerns such as racism. Ukraine has been accused of racism, notably against black people, despite its attempts to adopt European norms. Ukraine has emerged as a popular tourism destination throughout the world. Surprisingly, many of them are black children looking for fresh chances in education. Many African students choose to study in Ukraine for a variety of reasons, including the excellent schools and the opportunity to start over. Many black people go there because of the great level of education. Ukraine's colleges of medicine, engineering, and information technology are well known globally. African students who are unable to afford college can consider studying in Ukraine, where tuition is lower than in Western countries. At least 20% of Ukrainian students are African American. This demonstrates that the country is a fantastic place to study if you seek variety. Ukraine offers an education that extends beyond the classroom. Black people trying to better their lives saw it as a land of opportunity. The country's growing economy and diversifying sectors present numerous chances for dedicated individuals from all walks of life. Many black people travel to Ukraine in search of work, to establish successful businesses, or to better their lives. Africans have moved to Ukraine in search of a new beginning, and the hope that it will help them develop emotionally and professionally. However, the harsh circumstances of black Ukrainians occasionally clash with their hopes for a better life. Africans in Ukraine have reported racism, unemployment, and cultural isolation. People who expected a better transition are disappointed and disillusioned with what happened. Despite the enormous number of visitors, the racism experienced by black people in Ukraine was generally ignored. Racist violence on Africans escalated as the Russia-Ukraine conflict deteriorated. African Americans have faced increased racial profiling, discrimination, and violence. The intensifying fights indicated that the concerns of black Ukrainians are not being addressed, which is worrying. The war and its aftermath appeared to take precedence over the country's racial difficulties. This apathy toward black concerns has led some to question Ukraine's commitment to eliminating racism and promoting diversity. This video depicts what it means to be black in Ukraine. According to Terrell Starr, an independent specialist in New York, racism is on the rise in former Soviet republics. In May 2011, he presented his ideas at a Kennan Institute conference. These perspectives provide light on the challenges that African Ukrainian women face. Starr, a Fulbright scholar in Ukraine, employed a variety of techniques to understand African Ukrainian society. Starr finished his study with a magnificent show of photos depicting the stories of his interviewees. I appreciated the tale about Angelina Diash, a college student who is Angolan and Ukrainian. Diash, who was born and raised in Ukraine, presented a sad truth. She thought that a social visa was required for citizenship. Diash went on to say, "Even though my passport says I'm Ukrainian, I need a social visa." Star learned about minorities' challenges in their own country while studying Daesh. They were attempting to fit in, sought freedom, and discovered themselves. Daesh instantly embraced who they were after being chosen for the race, according to Star. The scope of Star's probe extended beyond personal stories. It exposed concerning tendencies of racism and intolerance in Ukraine. As an African American, Star was subjected to the heinous consequences of racism. In Kyiv, Star disclosed an unexpected revelation. Police in Ukraine stopped him 29 times and triggered alarms. His story demonstrated how black Ukrainians face increased discrimination. After 10 years, racism still exists in Ukraine. There have been allegations of harsh treatment near the Ukraine border since the beginning of the Russian offensive. Corinne Sky, a Zimbabwean-born student doctor, awoke to heartbreaking Twitter news on February 24, 2022. Following the bombs in Kyiv, a battle erupted. We needed to leave Ukraine right away, but ATM lines and cash constraints prohibited us from doing so. Corinne persisted, spending the day gathering statistics, performing a census, and establishing Telegram discussions to help her African co-workers survive. Corinne expected many African countries to be apathetic. Thus, she expected African students to suffer in Ukraine. Poland was the first near neighbor to welcome Ukrainian migrants, but it was unclear if Africans could as well. People were originally promised that they would be welcomed regardless of their visa status or nationality. Romania, Hungary, and Slovakia soon followed. When the Dnipro sirens went out on February 25th, Corinne and her co-workers realized it was now or never. Instead of a 10-hour trip to Lviv, they had to deal with military roadblocks, armed vigilantes, and the fear of the unknown for 26 hours. Corinne posted about their journey on Twitter, contributed money to individuals who were still trapped, and shared resources with other Africans wanting to flee during these hours. A risky journey tested people's resolve, and Corinne's desire to assist proved critical. Despite the upheaval, she was bombarded with calls and texts, which made her feel much worse. Corinne's mother battled to remain calm while caring for her granddaughter in Leicester as safety fears grew. Corinne used the money she earned to provide lodging for her companions and others she met in Lviv. 6 girls from Zimbabwe, Swaziland, and South Africa met her in a hotel in Lviv. They claimed to have been turned away and abused when they attempted to leave Dnipro owing to prejudice. The group also examined Ukraine-Poland border concerns, 65-hour work weeks, and racial discrimination. These heartbreaking experiences prompted Corinne and her friends to Romania rather than Poland. They faced discrimination once more at the Ukraine-Romania border. They waited in a race-segregated line for 10 hours in freezing temperatures, with no food or water. They arrived at the front of the line headed toward Ukraine after 10 hours. The front was only 9 kilometers away, but it took 3 days to get there. As they approached the front of the line of cars, something went awry. The gang was harassed and ostracized by Ukrainians. They were told to leave the car line and join a parade of black, Asian, and Arab people. A Ukrainian guy lunged at Corinne, making things much worse. Surprisingly, the border military did nothing. The man attempted to assault Corinne, but everyone laughed. The troops' racism and inactivity underscored the ongoing challenges that war refugees face because of their skin color. In reaction to the inequitable conditions at the Ukraine-Romania border, some Indian students invited Corinne and other African guests to join their line. For a time, kindness aided the difficult journey. However, problems remained. The group remained outside for another 10 hours in the snow, rain, and -3 degrees Celsius temperatures. There was little food or water, and there were no doctors or paramedics. The border was only guarded by troops. Corinne was physically injured, yet she found strength with the help of others. At the last military station and passport screening, Corinne made a fatal discovery. There was disagreement. Ukrainian family just skipped lines and walked straight to Romania via the barrier on her right. Corinne and other tourists were treated unfairly because of their skin color. The significant difference between their experiences and those of the Ukrainian family demonstrated this. Corinne felt at ease in Romania because of the friendly and helpful people. Despite its difficulties, Romania became a safe haven that exhibited genuine humanism. There are more stories like hers. Instability followed Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Jessica Orakpo, a 23-year-old Nigerian medical student, and Natizia, a 24-year-old Zambian economics student, were forced to flee their academic lives in Ternopil, western Ukraine, for safety near the Polish border. The cab arrived around 8 a.m. with a humming engine. This Saturday, they desired the Polish border, which was 136 miles away. They were 2 hours into the journey when they encountered a traffic bottleneck that dashed their aspirations. Jessica and Natizia persisted because they had no choice. They chose to trek with only a few pieces of clothes, blankets, and essential travel papers. The next day, they ran across another problem near the Polish border. Orakpo alleges it was motivated by race. While the Polish border provided refuge, it also witnessed horrific intolerance. Many African and South Asian Ukrainians had similar experiences, according to the UN Refugee Agency and other organizations. Orakpo and Natizia claim they were separated and denied exit from Ukraine because they are African. Rest stops brought welcome relief, but they also showed intolerance. After traveling for more than 12 hours, they rested on blankets at a basketball court that had been turned into a sanctuary. Thanks to a kind traffic officer, the next day, they arrived at a Mostyska bus stop, stopped just short of the Polish border. However, bigotry slowed their growth here as well. Officials made an unprecedented decision to only let pregnant and breastfeeding women on buses. Jessica and Natizia couldn't believe there was a separate bus for dogs and their owners. Jessica tried to speak Ukrainian and pretended to be pregnant to pass. Sadness followed short-lived prosperity, and racial animosity was prevalent. Observers screamed why persons of race were treated differently, heightening the tension. "We almost got in," Jessica added. She heard someone at the station question in Ukrainian, "Why are the black people coming in?" This explained why she was having problems getting in. She grew increasingly upset when she questioned the Ukrainian lady in charge of the queue as to why they were unfairly left out. A nonchalant shrug forced them to accept that, in a crisis, they could not flee due to their skin tone. Race issues in Ukraine affect more than just black teenagers like Jessica and Natizia. Athletes who traverse borders for fame and expertise face prejudice. Maryland professional basketball player Maurice Creek played for Indiana University and George Washington University. His situation. Despite his success on the court, the Ukraine conflict affected him. Creek faced reality in a Mykolaiv bomb bunker. He stressed that his wealth and reputation could not shelter him from the mayhem. Zimbabwean medical student Corinne Sky, based in Britain, also describes an uneasy order among Ukrainian refugees. Sky described it as Squid Games, with Ukrainians and Europeans on top, Indians and Center Easterners in the center, and Africans at the bottom. This perspective is unsettling because it demonstrates long-standing systemic prejudices and unjust behaviors. Maurice Creek and Corinne Sky show that prejudice doesn't care about your achievements or social level. Sports bring people together, but athletes must cope with racial hierarchies. The country's relationship with black pupils since the 1920s, when Africans began attending school in Ukraine, is intriguing. In 1957, the Soviet Union began recruiting African college and professional students, a sensible commercial move. It's fascinating that this happened when Ghana gained independence from Britain. The Soviet Union also sought good relations with African nations and showcased its burgeoning diplomacy. After Ukraine gained independence from the USSR in 1991, much changed. African students received fewer scholarships, indicating altered aims. Despite this development, African pupils liked Ukrainian schools. Ukraine has about 16,000 African students. They make up over 20% of international students. Ukraine's aim to admit African students appears to promote international collaboration and diversity. Jessica Orakpo, Natizia Nanyangwe, Maurice Creek, and Corinne Sky have presented separate versions that depict a diverse image. The contrast between how kind individuals look and how black pupils are mistreated in difficulties is alarming. Ukraine may be using black kids for political and diplomatic goals, but the truth is different. Despite their contributions to school and culture, many youngsters confront issues and biases that undermine their values. African-born and reared people experience racism. This goes beyond the Ukraine war. This fundamental issue keeps them at the bottom of the global order. Many people exhibit this prejudice, especially when they travel, relocate, or follow the news. Travel illustrates this. African passport holders must go through several government hoops, especially to acquire visas. It is expensive, hazardous, and time-consuming. An African's visa application might be denied for any cause, even the caseworker's attitude. Many accounts of Africans who had to overprove their position, spend additional money when they arrived, and dread being sent home too soon exist, but strong country citizens sail through the visa procedure and may travel without worry. This large discrepancy in how people are treated depending on their papers worsens global inequality. Along with travel issues, immigration is a major issue. Africans find it difficult and meaningless to get a visa or permanent residency abroad due to geopolitics and paperwork. Being termed nomads makes Africans look lazy and destitute. However, Westerners who undertake similar journeys are hailed as expats since they are hardworking and wealthy. Even when Africans want to integrate, they suffer resistance. People are considerably less inclined to accept them if they feel constantly different because of their skin color and race. The two sets of norms differ because Africans are skeptical about mixing while Westerners are welcomed. When the Ukraine crisis occurred, a Nigerian doctor who had lived there for years spoke Ukrainian well and served Ukrainians in lengthy lines without asking anything in return, was put to the back of the line and treated like any other black African. Visas and immigration are difficult enough, but the media's negative image of Africans and refugees makes them worse. Because Africa and its people have been erroneously labeled impoverished and violent, outsiders view the region differently. This cruel moniker affects policies and attitudes, forcing Africans, especially those fleeing conflict, suffer disdain and rejection while surviving in perilous situations. Looking at how individuals reacted to Ukrainian migrants shows how diverse media coverage is. Countries prioritize letting them in, and the news regularly highlights how unhappy blondes and blue-eyed individuals are when awful tragedies. This anecdote confirms a problematic assumption that catastrophe occurs when the victim comes near to white, which many people have internalized. However, Africans seeking safety have been rejected for years. The uneven treatment of persons in disaster depending on race or ethnicity shows that systemic racism persists even in humanitarian crises. Unfortunately, systematic racism persists throughout war, tragedy, and calamity. If anything, it becomes worse. Due to the system, Africans are constantly at a disadvantage, making them more likely to fail in times of difficulty. The systems meant to safeguard them are prejudiced against them. This indicates a larger issue than a few individual incidents. Remember that racists haven't always felt secure in Ukraine. The events in Ukraine have exposed racism in the country. Many consider it a safe and affordable school, provides superior education, and recognized European institutions. Ukraine has always been attractive because it offers high-quality education at lower rates than other European countries. Many African students have flocked to Ukrainian institutions for affordable tuition and a welcoming environment. Ukraine was regarded to be one of the last European countries with blatant racism, unlike France, Italy, and Spain. France has been accused of rampant discrimination, including the burkini ban for Muslim women. People of African heritage have been stopped by police in Italy for racial profiling. Spain has been attacked for racial stereotyping, including against immigrants and Africans. New accounts from African pupils like Jessica Orakpo and Ukrainian basketball player Morris Creek changed the narrative. Despite its reputation, Ukraine is not immune to racism. Now the government aspires to address these issues and regain its reputation as a welcoming and helpful nation for everybody.
Well, let me finish this video off here. Black people, wherever you come from, you're not a curse. In fact, you are the chosen people. You're the chosen people by the book. You're the chosen people by the Most High. You're the chosen people to set things in order. And what happened in these different religions like Islam, Christianity, they had to whiten it up because what the stereotype is. But you go back to the Bible until you find out from the people who've been over there. I did then on Afro-Palestinians. A lot of people don't know that. There are Afro-Palestinians over there. No one talks about. They show Palestinians. But even in, we don't know how many of them have died along with the other Palestinians. Yeah. But they won't be talked about. I feel passionate talking about this because, it's like I said, when it comes to being of this ethnic origin, you visible till you invisible till they make you visible. And that's sound like that's worldwide. And this is why Africans, black people should have their own thing. And why try to go places where you're not wanted? Why be around people that don't want you? But the same people out of the same countries where these people have gone to from Africa, they be right in their nation, wanting resources. They be right in their nations. And you ever notice that in certain countries in Africa, there's hardly war. There's war in Africa, but it's not like it is over there. They don't have to suffer a coldness like they do over there. But you know what? Serves them right as far as I'm concerned with the Ukraine. And I hope most of the people get up out of it from the nations. And whatever, and I would tell them, don't even go back to, even after this war is over, don't go back to these countries. Stay out of them. If that's the way their system is, don't do it. And I wish that government would have the balls to stand up to them and say, no, we're not coming to you. You're not getting no resources out of our nation. Why? Because we're not the color. Yeah, that's what you do with that. And I think that you just stay. That's why I would go to countries where there's other black people. Because clearly you see what they do. Majority of them, not everybody, but majority of the people, you see how the way they are? It's the same thing that it's kind of like the old how the way America was. And then not only that, South Africa. But yet you see some people probably go to South Africa. The system never changes, do it? But hey, but stay here. Your skin is not a curse. Remember that, whether you're a man or woman or a child. They are the curse. They are the barbarians. They're the animals who perpetuate that stereotype on you. They're the monkeys. Because look how they act. They can't even be a decent human being. I wouldn't even insult the animals. Even animals have more dignity than they do when it comes to these people. So hey, all I gotta say is keep your head up and remember that God made you on this planet not to be a servant under nobody. Because if they read the Bible, in which they don't like to tell you, the one that created you black man and you black woman first. You was the one that was the first one that was introduced to the Most High, that spoke to the solar system. You was the one. Some was part of the one was on his side and the one that was against the side. Your history, and the reason why they don't want to tell it in the actual history, because they don't want to paint the story in an image. So when they tell you any of the biblical characters, any part or even probably in the Quran and these other religions, it has to look white. Because deep down, they don't want to tell you the truth. But they want to keep the darker people at a totem pole. But we live in a time where God's going to even it out. So take this message, take this video, be blessed, and keep your head up And you come from Africa, man, stay out of those countries, man. It ain't worth it. So you be blessed. Take care. See you on the next video. Till next time, like and subscribe. And hope this open up to people what is really going on in the world. Something that they don't want to tell you about. But you are visible to God. You're invisible to them. Remember that. And that's all that counts.